Okay, we should be live now. Welcome everyone to the quarantine sessions. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, leadership. And we have a spectacular guest with us. His name is Alaa Saga. Alaa, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're most welcome. It's an honor. Thank you.
It's our honor. And I mean, leadership is one of my favorite topics, perhaps because it's one of the most difficult things to work on, right? We keep saying leadership is a muscle. You have to keep exercising it and practicing it. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, what is the difference? What makes a leader as opposed to a manager, right? When you're in a top position and you have a team, what makes the difference between that, manager and leader?
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for this question, Valentina. To be honest with you, the topic of leadership, a lot of people talked about this topic throughout the 30 or 40 years, the last 30 to 40 years. So I will talk about the difference between the leader and the manager. But before that, I would like actually to clarify a concept. When we hear after graduation, when someone asks me, Alaa, what do you think about a leader? If I told you the word leader, what do you imagine? Actually, the picture I used to draw, he is a person who is very charismatic. He's a slim person. He drives a sports car. He's actually very good looking. He's very charismatic. But actually, when I started to grow up and get more experience, I understood that it's not like that. So you can have a leader who is not charismatic. You can have a leader who is not a CEO, who is not a senior executive. And leaders are not managers. There is a huge difference between them. Right. Actually, there's one article which was published by Harvard Business Review in 2015. It was published by Nick Tesler. The title is an amazing article. I actually would like to recommend it to everyone. It's called "You Don't Need Charisma to Be an Inspiring Leader," which is true. Okay, so coming out from this, I would like to talk about who is a leader, right? And I want to ask you, Valentina, what do you think about this?
It's funny that you say that, because charisma, I always thought that charisma was a requirement, right? A prerequisite to be a leader. And this is something that myself, right, as an entrepreneur, I struggled with, like the idea of being a leader. I always felt like not good enough, not of a leader enough, because we see all these, charismatic leaders and we think it's something innate.
That's right. And that's actually what we see in media, what we see in the movies, what we see in the TV series is, all these leaders. However, when you read, the biographies, and the stories and the case studies of the huge big companies, you'll find that sometimes the owners, what they have is not charisma, they have vision. Okay. Right. And that's what really makes a difference. So leadership, as you know, it's the art of motivating a group of people. Okay. You know how to inspire people. You know how to motivate them to reach or to achieve just one common goal. So that's what differs you from a manager. A manager normally, he tries to create a goal. So he creates a goal for his team. That's our monthly goal. That's our quarterly goal. Okay. He has some KPIs and that's what he focuses on. However, when we speak about leaders, they create visions. Okay. And that's the difference. They create vision for the future. And you can see this, for example, the story that everyone knows, which is Steve Jobs and Apple. You can see, his strong, vivid vision and imagination of the future. It was clear.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. And if we talked about another difference between a leader and the manager, leaders simply are change agents. They are always trying to make a change. On the other hand, managers actually trying to maintain the status quo. So simply they are trying to make sure that everything will stay the same. However, leaders, they are looking for a way to change this product, to change the process, to change the business, to make things better, trying to improve the society, trying to improve the products. So they are trying to to make change, better changes. And that's one of the big differences between leaders and managers. One of the other differences I would like actually to discuss, Valentina, which is about the risks. And this is very obvious nowadays in the time of crisis. When COVID-19, spread and we started with this pandemic, you can see this huge difference in the mentality of leaders and managers. Leaders, they started to take risks. They started to, some of them, they started to pivot. Some of them, they started to adapt their products, adapt the business model. And actually, on the other hand, managers, they always try to control risk. The manager, he tries to make sure that everything will stay the same. Nothing will change. Right. So that's actually one of the other differences I can see.
Right. You're getting my eyes like this because the idea of, taking risks during crisis is unthought of, right? We have a comment from one of our viewers. Adham is saying, I wish I could take a step to start my startup, but I fear the risk. He fears the risk. What would you tell Adham?
Okay, so it's normal. It's normal that you have this fear. It's okay. You can acknowledge this point. You can acknowledge the fear, but then you have to act. Nothing bad, or actually one of the worst things that can happen, that the fear of commitment, that you are afraid to start. Just start small. And by the way, I'm telling this advice to myself because I am kind of a perfectionist, which is sometimes, stops me from taking a lot of steps forward because I want to do everything in the perfect way. So you might have the same thing like me. So let me tell you this out of experience, please just start small, plan for it, do your best, consult the right people, and then just be flexible.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I'll never forget that was said during the Startups Without Borders Summit. And it was Omar Samra who said, courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's having that fear and going for it nonetheless. So I think that's very important because we all have fear, right? Leaders fear too, right?
100%.
Right. So Adham is saying, yes, act is a good step, but it's not easy to act. And nowadays it's not easy in the current circumstances, right?
Yeah, it is not, to be honest. It is difficult. Yeah, you have to think twice before taking any step, especially adding any financial consequences. So you have to make sure that you do it the right way, because again, it's not easy to take a risk nowadays. It's doubled. Yeah, I agree with that. So Valentina, actually, yeah, go ahead.
Nobody said right? Nobody said it was easy, but we do it anyway. That's exactly why it's exciting.
Exactly, 100%. Actually, there's one thing I would like to discuss. I remember the one point when it comes to the difference between leaders and managers, which is actually, and we want to reflect on this. I guess we'll reflect on this, at the end of the discussion, which is actually that leaders care about the people, and that's a huge difference between managers and leaders. Most of the time, managers care about numbers. They care about targets.
Yeah.
But actually leaders, they care about people. And when you mentioned fear, Valentina, a lot of leaders now, they started to acknowledge the fear with the teams. They started to communicate with them. Yes, we are all afraid. It's okay. It's difficult. But then they have this mentality that, this too shall pass. Right. And that's the point. It is not the first pandemic. It's not the first crisis. And it will not be the last. Right. So, we had the Spanish flu, the World War and 2 and 1. So we have a lot, it's throughout the history, we have a lot of crises. So this will pass, let me assure you this. And we will look back to it. We'll, understand the lessons, we'll try to learn from it. But again, that's what makes a leader. He started to acknowledge the fear with his team. He started to communicate with them frequently to make sure that that's his role actually, in order to make sure that, they understand that he understands their fears.
Right. You just drew a huge smile on my face. I'm going to show you something because I have this post-it that I have stuck on my table, and it says great leaders sacrifice numbers for their people, right? I wrote this down after hearing a podcast about leadership, and I'm like, you just drew a huge smile on my face. Because it's true. And that's a key difference as well, right? With managers.
That's right. And I'll be honest, having a leader nowadays is not that easy, because the leader, he has a lot on his shoulder. Okay. Having managers, we have a lot of managers now, but having a leader, who can have followers. So the leader, he knows how to inspire people, and this part is really vivid in any biography. And at the end of the podcast, we will actually have some recommendations for some books and podcasts. So when you read in biographies, even if it's for companies or for CEOs and leaders, you'll find this vividly. They know how to transfer their vision to the other people. However, there are actually a couple of points in this. So the leader, first of all, he set up a clear vision. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, he knows how to deliver this vision vividly, continuously to his team. But actually, he do a couple of other things. Number one, he started to build and coach the team, make them stronger, okay, to achieve this vision. He focuses on their strength, on their abilities, okay, how to make them better people, not only better employees, no, better people. Yeah. He looks to the human part of the equation. So that's number one. That's what he does as well. The other thing a leader can do, he started to throughout the way, he started to continuously remind them why we are doing this. Right. Okay, so that's what I believe.
Right. I love these concepts, and I love it. They really, really resonate with me. Right. Now you're leading a team, no matter how small or big it is. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have a team somehow, and this crisis comes up. Global pandemic. We can't go to the streets. Shops are not selling. Global recession. How can you reassure your team? How can leaders today or entrepreneurs reassure their teams when they're not sure everything will be all right, right?
Thank you very much for this question. This is a very important one. Okay. The way I see it that actually we have two pandemics. We have a viral one, which is the COVID-19, and we have a social pandemic, which is the fear. It's everyone feels this, okay? Everyone is not assured. We don't know what's going to happen. And I'm talking about literally everyone, even the rich people. It's reached to everyone. So what should I do as a leader? Number one, like we said before, I have to acknowledge the fear. That's number one. Okay, it is okay. It happens, and this will pass. I have to have this mentality, this positive mentality. Number two, I have to listen to them. Okay, and that's actually some leaders they miss this point because they have a lot on their plate. Mm-hmm. So they have a lot of tasks. They are thinking strategically what I'm going to do. I don't have cash and all this. So then they forget to sit down and just listen. Mm-hmm. You have to listen to people's fear. And number three, communication. I cannot stress more on this, really, because some of my clients, when they started to call me, they missed a very important thing. They started to communicate maybe every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. They think, I know that my team, they know what's happening. I don't need to communicate. They know what's wrong. They know that we are in crisis. No, they need to hear from you. They need to know that you're listening. The problems. And the other thing, which is actually, it's with the mentality as well. What can I do as a leader? So let's stop focusing on what I can do, what I can change. Yes, we have a pandemic. We have an economical crisis. Yes, we have all of this. What you can do, that's what will make the real difference. What you can do with your team, what you can do with your company, what you can do with your product, what you can do with your customer, that's what makes the real difference.
Right. Right. And I follow Tony Robbins, which is one of the, one of the biggest leadership
Yeah.
speakers. He keeps saying constantly that by listening to your team, you should be able to understand what their values are so that you can lead them better. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I find it really complicated. It's hard to really grasp what the values of a person are and how can you really, work towards all those values uh, while working towards the mission, right?
Oh, so this is actually a very large or very big topic when it comes to values and behaviors. So to be honest, it's very important. If he is a good leader, I suppose that he has a team who shares the same values. And this is extremely important because to have a successful culture and to have a successful company, you have to have a team that shares the same values, to have the same values, to have the same principles, because you cannot motivate or inspire someone to share with you your values and to share with you your mission and vision, and he actually doesn't have these values. So if you have that kind of a team, so you can easily, the values, or even if you created that team, so you know the values, so you can easily address them.
Right. I was saying I like today's topic. Pier Francesco saying hi. Hi. How can we know the kind of decisions? How can we be brave enough to make the decisions that need to be made in these times of crisis, right? What do you think are key decisions a leader should be prepared for?
Okay, so this is also another important question. Number one, as a leader, you have to understand that you will be judged in the court of public opinion. So as a leader, whatever decision you will make, everyone is looking at you, okay? So if you said, you know what, I will open my company, I don't care that much about, the COVID-19, I will take my measures, but still everyone will go back to the office. That's a decision, I respect it. You can have a lot of advocates, no problem. But then you have to understand that the public, the people, they will judge you, okay? And we can see for example, in Egypt, okay, it happens that we saw this, two big famous businessmen, they took different decisions, okay. Naguib Sawiris, he took a decision, you know what, we have to get things going, okay. And I guess Mahmoud Al-Arabi for Al-Arabi group, he took another decision, guys, don't worry, whatever happens, we are with you, it's okay. So it's kind of different decisions.
Yeah.
And again, both decisions were judged by the public. So that's number one that you have to understand. Number two, you have to be honest, you have to be truthful, and you have to be realistic. And at this part, don't be optimistic. And I will tell you why. Because when you speak and when you take decisions, for example, I know people, especially with family business, they did a meeting and they said, don't worry, nothing will happen. Everyone will get paid. Nothing will change. We are strong enough. And then in 2 weeks, they start to lay off some people. Okay. So this is not optimism. At this stage, as a leader, your role is to be realistic. So for example, and I know another people, they did this. And actually a lot of startups, they did this. So he sat down with his team, you know what, we have a cash to cover us for the next 1 month, for the next 2 months. After that, the salaries will be deducted 50%. And he started to just, get his feet on the ground. So that's another point. The third point is before taking any decision, you have to have empathy. Mm-hmm. It's very important. You have to have empathy. You have to have emotional intelligence. Okay. You have to understand that these are families. They will be affected by your decision. So please try to make the layoff decision the last resort. And if you follow these steps, I believe that your team and your employees, they will understand that you did your best. Okay. And the last rule when it comes to taking a decision, simply, which is leaders make the first sacrifice. So it's kind of logical. So if I will deduct the salary, I will be the highest percentage. I will be the first one. So I will do everything the first. I have to sacrifice first. So that's a characteristic of a leader. I never read or met or dealt with a leader who does not sacrifice first. He's not the first one to be in the office. He's not the first one he's working hard. He follows what he speaks. You know, he walks the talk, all this stuff. So.
Yeah, it's a big paradigm shift, right? When you understand that. I recently heard the leader of the company, their job is not to take care of customers or the product, it's to take care of the team. And that was such a paradigm shift for me. What you're saying really, really resonates. Yeah, please.
I couldn't agree more with you. Definitely. So, and that's why it's not an easy job for a leader. You know, and again, that's what sets apart the leaders from the managers. And it was crystal clear in this crisis. You know, we saw a lot of managers, they acted and actually it collapsed. The companies collapsed because of the decisions.
Right. Ahmed is asking, would a leader lay off himself first? I don't think we're talking about layoff.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, I don't think he can do so. So yeah, but why? So actually, from this crisis started, I started to speak to the people I know, my clients, and to my colleagues working in multinational companies. I wanted to understand what they are doing, how they are approaching decisions. And for example, I spoke to one of the HR business partners in one of the big companies in Malaysia, and I asked them, he's an HR business partner. So what's your strategic decision? So that was 1 month ago. He told me that the first 3 decisions we did, number 1, we stopped any promotions in the company. We stopped as well all the merit increase, all the profit share, and all these decisions. It's affecting, you know, the C-suites or the high executives. It's not affecting, you know, the other grades. And this is very important. They decreased the C-suite salary by 50%. That was the first decision. Okay, and what they did, they said that fresh or actually grade 1 or the least employees or the less employees taking salaries, they will not get any deduction. Mm-hmm. Okay, so decisions like this, what makes a difference, I believe.
Right. Now let's talk about exercising this muscle, right? We said before, it's not something you're born with, it's something you kind of learn, you exercise it. How can you do it? What are the practices or the habits that you can, you know, utilize to really exercise the leadership muscle?
Okay, I believe that you cannot learn leadership. Why? Because leadership is a set of skills. Okay, so what I believe in, you have to understand what do you need to have to be a good leader. Okay, and just start to work on these skills. Okay, yes, you can learn how to be skillful. You can master all the skills, which will make you, you know, a true leader. So again, for example, communication skills. Okay, communication skills is one of the topics. It's really underrated. I know that everyone talks about communication skills, but really, it's a critical skill. Okay, to be able to handle and to communicate with your stakeholders, internally, externally, it's not easy, it's difficult, and it is a true skill for the leader. So what I want to say, because I don't want to take a lot of time, what I believe is leadership, in order to be a good leader, you need to have certain skill sets. Okay, you need to work on these skill sets. You need to read a lot. You need to have a lot of knowledge. You need to have a lot of practice. Okay, you need to you have a lot of managerial skills, because to be able to take your team from point X to point Y, you need to manage the way as well. So you need to have a lot of managerial skills. You need to understand what's the difference between this managerial style and this managerial style. Okay, you need to know how to combine different managerial styles. So what I want to say is, in order to exercise the muscle of leadership, you need to take different routes. to do a lot of things, but actually all of these things will take you to the same road.
Right. Let's come with some recommendations on tools that we can utilize, right? What are the books we should be reading to learn leadership? What are the podcasts we should be listening to? Do you know some online tools we can use? What is your top recommendations?
Okay. Number one, it's what I believe is a leader. He should really understand what's going on around him. He has to understand, even if it's not affecting him. So what I do and what I actually recommend doing is you have to read the business news daily. You have to read the worldwide news daily. You have to understand the, economics. You have to understand on the economical perspective what's happening around you. That's number one. Number two, I love Harvard Business Review collection, and I recommend it to everyone. To be honest, it's amazing. It's amazing. So I recommend Harvard Business Review top 10 collection. It's really amazing. And also I recommend a couple of books. It's biographies actually. Number one is Wild Company: The Untold Story of Banana Republic. Okay, it's the story of a company called Banana Republic. It's an amazing and inspiring story about leadership. It's not a little bit famous, it's not well known to everyone, but it's really great. And of course, you have to read about Steve Jobs. So there are different books that discuss Steve Jobs' biography. I recommend the one by Walter Isaacson. It's really famous. It's well known. He did an amazing job, writing down the biography. When it comes to the podcasts, so I wish I have a podcast. It's called Business Made Easy Podcast. I can recommend it. It's an Arabic podcast. So simply the aim of the podcast is to simplify the business and management concepts to everyone in the MENA region. So I hope you can listen to it. We have more than 40 episodes with different speakers, different interviews. That's number one. And in the podcast, to be honest, you have a lot of amazing podcasts. Okay, for example, you have the John C. Maxwell podcast. Okay.
Yes, one of my favorites.
John C. Maxwell is my favorite author. I read almost every book he written. He's an amazing author. So that's another one. However, that's mainly about it. I have one last thing when it comes to taking knowledge. Okay, you have to critical read or critical question the knowledge you take. Okay, it's very important, because I will be honest, now you can read a book, a master book or a classic, like we say in management or in leadership, written 20 years ago, but then you have to question the practicality of this information for what we are having now. Okay, so whenever you speak to a podcast, whenever you hear a new theory, whenever you hear a new tip and trick, stop, ask yourself why and how and what. Right. Yeah, I believe this is extremely important.
Yeah, of course. We have a few questions from the audience now.
Please.
Mona is asking, can leadership be learned from books?
I wish it can be. Yeah, really. However, it's very important. Look, I am an advocate, and I'm an advocate for learning and for reading and for getting knowledge and getting certified. I love this. Okay. However, it's very important to know what you are doing. Knowledge gives you structure. Okay. So, for example, you have a problem that happened, a crisis that we are doing now. If you know crisis management, if you read about it a lot, you know structurally what you should do. Okay. So, what's the steps? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You understand. So it's very important. It's the first step, like we say.
Right. Riham is asking, should a leader befriend his colleagues or be an authority figure only? That's a very important question.
Yes, definitely.
Because it can get dirty sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's right. Look, before I used to recommend, like four or 5 years ago, I used to recommend for leaders and managers, you should have a favorite managerial style. For example, you should be known as, okay, I am the one who have a friend with everyone, who is really smooth and, tries to make a friendship with everyone, for example, okay? But nowadays, I recommend that you should be able to deal, or actually should be able to use all the managerial skills. It depends on the situation. So it's situational based. So in my team, I can be a friend to a person, and I can use my authority with another person. So it depends on the situation, depends on you reading the personality of your employees, okay, how to motivate other people. So everyone can be motivated differently, everyone can be managed differently, especially nowadays, okay? We have huge differences in personalities, in values, in behaviors. We have the Generation Z now in the workplace. They have total different values, okay? You can never manage a Generation Z employees and a Generation X employees with the same way, with the same managerial style. You can never do so.
Right. Ahmed is asking if we can write down the link to your podcast. We'll definitely do that in the comments of this video. So stay tuned. And he's asking, do you consider yourself a leader? What makes you believe so? Have you learned it, or were you born with it? Tough cookie, he's saying.
Look, that's a very tough question. Yeah, what can I say? I believe that I'm doing good with it. Yeah, I don't believe I'm doing a bad job with being a leader. Okay, to be honest. How I learned it by observation. That's my strength point. Okay, what I used to do, and I will tell you what I used to do. I was lucky enough to start my career in one of the multinational companies in Vodafone International Services, and I was lucky enough to meet great leaders. What I used to do, I used to observe them, literally, and I'll tell you what I used to do. I used actually to in my weekend, in my vacation, I used to come at work and I take permission from my supervisor. I tell him, I want to shadow this leader. What I used to do, I grab a chair, I follow him. That's it. For a whole day, for a whole 8-hour shift, I just follow him. Really, I kept doing this for 3 years. Okay. So, for example, when I know someone who is really good with people, so I want to understand this, I want to learn it, I follow him. I take his acceptance. I follow him. I start to how he deals with people. Okay, and I keep doing this with different leaders. It added a lot to my experience. So that's one of the things I did. I believe it can really help.
Definitely. Alaa, it has been such an incredible session. I mean, I'm filled with ideas. My eyes were twinkling all the time. Tarek, by the way, he just posted the link to your podcast. So thank you very much, Tarek.
Thank you very much, Tarek.
And thank you so much. This has been incredible. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. And we will see you again on Monday for a session on branding. So thank you so much again, Alaa.
Thank you very much, Valentina, and thank you very much for your efforts. It's really amazing. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.